Good afternoon. I'm Scott Monroe, managing editor of the Kennebec Journal, Morning Sentinel, and centralmaine.com. Thanks to the 280 or so people who are joining us today for the first 2021 installment of Maine Voices Live Waterville. A big thanks, as always, to our presenting sponsor, Colby College, which has continued to support these programs as virtual events during the pandemic. Before I introduce our guests, here's a word from Patrice Franco, Director of Global Studies and the Grossman Professor of Economics at Colby College.
Hi, everyone, on this stormy day. I hope you're all warm and safe. As Scott just mentioned, I'm the Director of Global Studies and Grossman Professor at Colby College. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. Many thanks for joining us for this year's first Maine Voices Live Waterville. Colby is proud to be the presenting sponsor of this event, which is helping to keep our community connected during these days of social distancing. This afternoon, we look forward to hearing from Matt Apuzzo, a two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter for the New York Times, and about his work on the paper's international investigative team. Before becoming a globally renowned reporter, Matt cut his journalistic teeth at a number of newspapers, including our own Morning Sentinel. I'm so proud that Matt is also a graduate of Colby College, class of 2000. You'll note Matt's graying hair, where he served as an editor of the Echo, Colby's student newspaper. Not surprisingly, since his earliest days as a journalist at the Echo, Matt was asking the hard but important questions to get to the root of the issue and share critically important stories. In the tradition of Lovejoy, I've had the pleasure of serving with Matt on Colby's Lovejoy Selection Committee, which once a year recognizes and celebrates individuals of our time who embody courageous journalism. In this tradition of Lovejoy, Matt is a tenacious and principled reporter in pursuit of the truth. When Matt spoke at the Lovejoy Symposium a couple of years ago, I was fascinated by his work on Russia. I hope we get to some of that today. Matt, Colby is so proud of all your work, and we in Waterville are so pleased to have you here. We look forward to a fabulous conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice, and that was a great intro for Matt. Interviewing Matt will be his former colleague, Amy Calder, who covers Waterville and city government for the Morning Sentinel, and she writes a column, Reporting Aside, which appears on Saturdays. A reminder, as always, we welcome your questions, which you can submit using the Q&A button on Zoom. We will be reviewing those, and we'll get to as many audience questions as we can in the latter half of today's event. So now please join me in welcoming Matt and Amy to the virtual stage.
Hello, Matt. Welcome. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. And welcome to all of you who have joined in. We really appreciate it. We appreciate the fact that you're here. It's so good to see you, Matt. You know, you've been working as an investigative correspondent on the international desk based in Brussels since 2018. How are things going? And is there anything you're working on now that you can tell us about?
Sure, it's going great, and it's great to see you, Amy. It's been too long, but yeah, I mean, look, there's the story of the world, right? Is COVID, and right now, it's the vaccine rollout. Before in 2020, I was covering how different governments responded to the pandemic, why we weren't more prepared. Obviously. The paper put a lot of resources into covering the US response, but I think there were a lot of lessons to learn internationally, so I spent a lot of time traveling as best I could in 2020. And in 2021, I think we're trying to figure out how the vaccine rollout's going and trying to keep track of the different variants that are going on. So travel, I haven't been able to do too much travel yet this year, but hopefully as things start to ease up a little bit, I'll be trying to get to different places and see what's going on.
Yeah, one of your most recent pieces was about the secret multi-billion-dollar contracts between governments and the pharmaceutical or the manufacturers of the vaccines. That story ran on January 28th. That was very interesting. Tell us a little bit about that for people who may not have read about it.
Sure. So, I mean, governments, primarily the United States and the European governments, have cut these deals with vaccine companies to try to get vaccines rolled out as quickly as possible. And it's by some measures, been incredibly successful. We've produced vaccines at a faster clip than ever before. The challenge is been figuring out, well, what if we taxpayers given up in return, because these are still multi-billion-dollar international companies, and a lot of the details of these contracts are still being kept secret. And so we've been trying to put together, what are the details? What have we given away? What have we given up? And are we getting a good deal? And obviously, when you say a good deal, if a year from now we don't worry about COVID anymore, then probably people are going to say, we got a good deal. I don't really care what the fine print was, but as you know, it's our job. Somebody's got to read that fine print. So we've been trying to figure out, for instance, one of the things that they gave away was liability protection. They say, look, if the vaccines don't work, if we won't hold the vaccine makers responsible. Even though the government kicked in a lot of money to make the vaccine itself and contributed the underlying science behind the vaccine, the government's waiving all rights towards the intellectual property on the vaccine. So these are just the sorts of things we've been trying to figure out. It's just a lot of reading and trying to understand that stuff.
A lot of work. I was interested in the fact that the companies get to keep the patents.
Yeah.
So that, and how does that affect countries that may not be as have the vaccine as accessible?
It's a huge issue. And, it's funny, at the end of last year, I was in South Africa for a couple of weeks. And at the time, it seemed like this question of, it seemed like the question of access to vaccines in developing countries was going to be one of fairness. Like, is it fair that rich countries get to the front of the line and everybody else gets to the back of the line? But what we're seeing in 2021 is that it's actually not really even a question of fairness. This virus is mutating at such a clip that if we vaccinate all of the United States and all of Europe by the end of the summer, and then huge parts of the developing world wait until 2024 to get vaccinated, it's just creating a little mutation factory that that risks undermining the vaccines in the United States and in Europe. And so I think governments are starting to realize that there's a priority. They need to put a priority on making sure the vaccine is rolled out more equitably, not just out of a sense of fairness, but it's self-interest.
Right. But by the way, what's the COVID situation like in Brussels where you are? Are you working mostly from home or virtually? Are you able to travel at all?
So yes, I can travel. The borders travel is restricted in Belgium and throughout much of the EU. As a journalist, you have the ability to travel with the right paperwork. And I've had 7 or 8 COVID tests so far. And I work from home, I would say most days. I do come to the office and, today I'm in the office, it's just me. So, I feel pretty okay about that. But coronavirus is, I would say, under control right now in Belgium, but largely because we remain pretty locked down. So I think the thinking of the government is to try to keep, restaurants are open only for takeaway, to limit contact as much as possible until the vaccine hits a critical mass. And we've got about, I think, 400,000 vaccinations so far in a country of 11 million. It's about 4%. So it's not great, but we're getting the vulnerable population done first. So that's where we're at.
Well, I hope you're staying safe. You are a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner. When I think of that and I think of our days at the Sentinel, I'm just so very proud of you. In 2012, while you were with the Associated Press, you were with the AP for 11 years, I think. You worked on a team that investigated the New York Police Department's surveillance of Muslims and Osama bin Laden's plot against America. Could you talk a little bit about that? I know it's very complicated and yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the gist of it, right, is that after 9/11, this idea of preventing a terrorist attack was front and center, and the New York City Police Department basically built a little mini CIA inside the NYPD with help from the actual CIA in ways that really blurred the lines between traditional police work and intelligence gathering. And what we ended up seeing was kind of this mission creep of an agency that ended up not just sort of surveilling suspected terrorists, but just sort of surveilling all Muslims and building these files on Muslim neighborhoods and, keeping tabs on where people ate and where they prayed and eavesdropping in cafes and writing down what random people thought while, or said while watching the news. And it became just sort of this sort of, this ever-growing collection of intelligence that wasn't even really intelligence. It was just the facts of everyday life in Muslim America. So, that story ultimately, I think that series and the lawsuits that followed ultimately led the police department to reconsider some of the ways it did policing in Muslim areas. I think historically is going to be looked at as, a good example of how, as a country, we reacted to 9/11. One of the many stories of how we reacted to 9/11.
Yeah, it has been, 9 years or so. You and Adam Goldman
19
also,
years.
yeah. Oh, right. Yes. No, but I meant from the time you wrote the stories.
Oh yeah, it feels
yeah.
like just yesterday.
You and Adam Goldman was also at the AP at the time, and you both later wrote this book called Enemies Within, based on your investigative reporting of the police department's spying on the Muslims and bin Laden and so forth. It's a very compelling read, and I'm impressed with the number of sources you had in both in the FBI, the CIA, and the NYPD, to the point where you could actually describe these rooms that the FBI interviewed people in, and the police department was able to, do their work. Can you talk a little bit about your experience? How long did it take you to write this book?
I think it took us about 6 months of real,
Wow.
we had two of us, right? And
Yeah.
we were building off of work we had done for the AP. And so it was a lot of fun. It was something obviously I've never done before, and it was a style of writing I'd never done before. But yeah, I think ultimately, even people in the police department who didn't love what we were writing, they saw that we were going to at least give them a fair shake, and they understood that we were trying to get it right, and they took the time to sit down with us. So yeah, there's no secret, right? I mean, there's no secret handshake. It's just talking to people, and
Well, you're the type of person, you're very open and accessible, and I think that helps a lot when you're digging into these stories. Does the demographic unit or the zone, does that still exist in the NYPD?
No, they got this is the unit that was eavesdropping in public places and collecting files on everyday people. No, they shut that down as part of their settlement in the various lawsuits. Actually, it was shut down even before the lawsuits came, sometime after the stories came out.
Yeah. Your next Pulitzer. You've been with the New York Times since 2014. In 2018, you were on a team that won another Pulitzer for your reporting on the Russia interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, which included a lot about then FBI Director James Comey and the Hillary Clinton emails. Can you touch on that a little bit? That was also a lot of work on your part.
We have to. I feel like we all have PTSD. Yeah. No, I mean, that was those were crazy times, and going into a presidential election where essentially both campaigns were under FBI investigation. At that point, I had covered law enforcement and national security for about a decade, and my colleagues for even longer than that. And we were just like we're in uncharted waters every day. It just felt like what like they're investigating, they're doing this investigation over here, and then it's like 2 days after they shut down the emails investigation that they open on the Trump campaign connections to Russia, and then you're seeing the evidence of the hacking, and it's just one Trump person, one Trump campaign official after another is in contact with Russians, and I just think I can't even grasp how history is going to look at the 2016 election and try to make any sense out of it.
Yeah. By the way, do you ever think about what's happening in this country now and wish you were here to cover some of it?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I spent 10 years covering Washington, more than that, and loved it. And I'm just learning so much here, and really stretching myself in ways I haven't before. And I just think you have to keep growing as a reporter and trying new things. And when I made the decision to take this leap, there's only been a few times when I've kind of looked back and said, but usually that's because of being in a pod with these great journalists and great friends, and not that I'm just desperate to go cover that story.
Right. You teach graduate students at Georgetown University. Are you still able to do it now virtually?
I'm not able to do it virtually. I guess I'm still technically some degree of affiliated there, but both because of the time zone and the virtual nature of things, I'm not able to do it. But hopefully, when I return, I will get back into the classroom, because that's a lot of fun.
One of the things you tell your students, at least I read that you told your students, this is a very basic thing, but don't be afraid to knock on doors.
Yeah. I'm a big door knocker. I'm a big believer in going to people's homes.
And not to be afraid, and it's a very useful tool, isn't it?
Really is. And I mean, I frankly, I saw that at the Morning Sentinel. I mean, it's being a community newspaper. It's one of the hardest things about, frankly, the COVID era is so many of my interactions are like this, over the computer. And one of the first things that I learned working in the newsroom with reporters like you was, you got to get out there, you got to get face to face, you got to go see people, and the principles are the same. It's just, you don't be afraid to knock on somebody's door,
right?
And ask,
And we're going to get into the Sentinel era of your life. We're leading up to it. You grew up, you were born in Cumberland, Maine.
Okay.
Right?
Cumberland,
and you went to high school
at Greeley in Cumberland. Yeah.
Greeley, yep. And then how did you decide to go to Colby College? 1996 it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. I sort of stumbled. My college search process was really sort of haphazard, and it was just one of these great, chance things that I probably, to do it over again, would have gone back to and said, why would you have worked as hard as you did in high school and then not thought more, deeply about where you go to college? But I gotta tell you, I went to Colby. I love the campus. I love the people, and it was sort of a no-brainer for me, and it just clicked. I met my wife there, and it was fantastic.
You majored in biology. You wanted to go to medical school, right?
I did major in biology. I am a cautionary tale, Amy, of what happens if you get D's in organic chemistry. You will flame out.
Well, you started working on the Colby Echo, the student newspaper at Colby. Did you start in sports, and then what happened?
I started at the school paper covering sports just as a lark, kind of a fun thing to do. And through Colby, I met Warren Watson, who at the time was the editor of the Morning Sentinel. And he said that they needed somebody to work the night sports desk at the Morning Sentinel, just taking game scores, box scores of like high school basketball games and such. And I said, oh, that's super, super nice, but I'm busy with my studies and I'm going to be a doctor someday. And he's like, well, you know, we pay $8 an hour. And I was like, $8? I am in. So I worked, I don't know, 2-3 nights a week at the Sentinel. It was, I think my day started at like 5 and I would go to, you know, midnight or 1 when the paper went to press. And I did that a couple nights a week. And it felt like I was a millionaire. $8 an hour. I mean, in hindsight, I probably should have studied maybe a little bit more during those hours, but it was a lot of fun.
And look where it got you, huh? You were the Colby Echo editor at the end, right? Yeah. You touched on this a little bit about knocking on doors and so forth, but what might you have learned at the Sentinel that informed or influenced what you're doing today? I may be presumptuous in asking you that question, but aren't there some basic tools that one uses in journalism that are universal?
I got to tell you, one of the things that stands out to me the most, Amy, was at nights there's only a handful of reporters there, and I was there taking these game scores, and you got a call from somebody on the city council, right? Whoever the chair of the city council was, and he or she said that they just wanted to let you know that about 3 or 4 of them were going to be going out to dinner, and they just wanted to let you know, and that if you wanted to come, you were welcome to come. And you said, okay, great, thanks. And I said, oh, they just invite you to dinner? And you said, no, there's enough of them there that it's a quorum, and they don't want it to look like it's an illegal meeting. So they're letting us know that they're meeting. And looking back on it, such like in a really important moment for me, because here is government, because they know that journalists are watching and the public is going to hold them accountable, they're taking the step to not just say, all right, guys, let's go out and get a couple of beers and have a steak. Somebody thinks like, I better call the local reporter and just let them know that there's no funny business up. And we got to let her know that she can come and watch because, we're meeting and we technically make a quorum. And just that idea of, working hard to hold government accountable, but doing so in a fair way that the people you cover want to affirmatively reach out to you to let you know things because they know it's important. That is a lesson that's really stuck with me. I mean, the way you covered the city council and did it so fairly and were so respected, that's just something that I've seen, and that's really stayed with me. And then the other thing was the way Doug Harlow covered the cancer cluster in Winslow related to fly ash. I mean, this was stuff that was really meaningful to people and meaningful to people's lives at a time when the company was saying, "Oh, this had nothing to do with fly ash," and the way Doug handled that. He's not a doctor, but you have to learn how cancer clusters work. And I just saw the work that was put in to cover the community, and it really was a sense of mission, but it also was so interesting because you're learning something new every day. And so those things like that really, really stuck with me.
Wow, that's great, Matt. And as you were talking, it made me think, in some ways we educate the public. I think that the city solicitor in Waterville is very good at, educating the city council and other city officials about the right to know. There have been many situations where I've sort of caught people meeting when they weren't supposed to be. And so I'd say, you can't do this. So I was lucky that in Waterville, they'd be willing to call me up and say, we're having this meeting.
Yeah.
I think
just to go down, I mean, the basic thing of going down and doing, I don't remember, maybe it was Doug, somebody took me down and showed me just how to do the cop checks, just to like check the police logs every day and just to see what happened. I just feel like there's this sense in the internet era that we live in that we can all just do our jobs remotely. We can all just do our jobs over the internet. But I think community journalism in all journalism, it's ultimately about going there and seeing people and knocking on doors and going to the police department and doing the shoe leather that, I mean, frankly, that I'm sad to see is we're losing in community newspapers around the country. I just think that's a real loss.
Yeah. I guess in this vein, what advice would you give to prospective journalists or young journalists just starting out, other than what we've talked about, some of the?
Yeah, I mean, the fundamentals, the best advice I could give, I guess, is find somebody who will help you, who will teach you. I was really lucky after leaving the Sentinel. I had a great editor in New Bedford, Massachusetts, who really took me under his wing, and I had colleagues who showed me the ropes and put up with big, loud, overeager kid coming in like a bull in a china shop, and find those relationships. I mean, unfortunately, the sort of the normal ladder in journalism of you go start at a small newspaper and go to another one and go to another one, and then that doesn't really exist as much anymore, because a lot of the mid-level, mid-sized newspapers, they're just not hiring as much anymore. So the feeder system that there's always existed, and the learning experience that reporters were getting doesn't exist as much anymore. And I think it's a real loss. And so I guess I would encourage prospective journalists to find those relationships, find mentors.
One of your colleagues, Rebecca Corbett, who also went to Colby, told us when we interviewed her at the MPA, the Maine Press Association, that she really, when she tells stories to her young reporters at the Times, and she tells them about her experience at the Morning Sentinel, they're wowed by the stories about reporting in small town Maine. But there are things that really informed what she does now in some ways.
So it's absolutely right. And Rebecca and I, Rebecca was a big reason why I'm at the Times. And, she and I talk fondly about our times in Maine.
Your times in Maine. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're both have, texted each other wistfully about somehow trying to figure out in the age of COVID how to get to Maine.
Oh, well, we miss having you here. What's next for you, Matt? Is there any story you'd like to do that you haven't? Any plans for another book, possibly?
I would love to write another book someday. I don't have any plans for that. I'm really loving the learning experience I've got right now. It's this huge world, and figuring out how all these different countries work. I spent a couple months in 2019 in Hungary and the Czech Republic, and learning about how corruption works in Central and Eastern Europe. So what's next for me is hopefully just to keep learning, and hopefully finding good stories and telling somebody something they don't know.
Are you glad you didn't go to medical school?
I am. I mean, if nothing else, the debt alone would be crushing.
I got to ask you. I've got to ask you to tell a quick story that I read about when, let's see, Bill Cotter was the president of Colby, and he was leaving, and Bro Adams was coming in, and you got the tip before anybody else did who the new president was going to be, and you told Earl Smith about it, who was dean of the college. Tell that story. That's a funny little story.
So what happened was I was the editor of the paper, and there was a search committee that was selecting the next president, and I got a tip that it was going to be Bro Adams from Bucknell. And so I called Bucknell and called the president's office, and he was in a meeting, and I said that I was from the school paper of Colby College, and he immediately took the phone call, which I felt like, frankly, that alone should have been confirmation. And I said, look, I'm doing a story that you're going to be the next president, and he's great, and I was hoping to talk to you a little bit. And he said, well, that's not been announced yet, and I have to sort of tell some people, and yada yada yada. And it would be great if you could just wait a week so we can get that lined up. And because I really need to tell people. And I said, well, we go to press tomorrow, so you have till then. And thank you very much. And so then Earl Smith, who was the dean of the college, who's a wonderful human being and was the advisor of the school paper, called and said that he asked me not to run the story because it was going to cause some headaches for the new president. And I said, I'm sorry, we're going to run the story. And so the next day, the paper came out, and Earl called me to his office, and he said, I have to tell you, I've been asked to tell you that college is really disappointed. It caused a lot of headaches and got off on the wrong foot. But also just want to tell you, I'm super proud of you. And that was Earl, and that was, if only everybody who had a complaint with me for the rest of my career also ended up being like, and that a boy kid.
You weren't about to compromise your integrity. You wanted to get that story out there, just like a good journalist.
I'll tell you, I would love to say compromise my integrity. I just knew I had a great story, and we had the chance to have it first. So, nobody was making any life and death argument. So
you had the bug. I love this story. When you left Washington in 2018 to go to Brussels, the New York Times Washington bureau chief, Elizabeth Bumiller, I think is pronounced, said that you would be missed in Washington. She said, and I quote, Matt is smart, fast, terrifically well-sourced, fair-minded, a wonderful writer, and great company. He's had the misfortune to sit 5 feet away from editors, but we've loved his running commentary on just about everything. We hope he doesn't stay away too long. Her description of you is one I might have uttered 20 years ago when you worked at the Sentinel. You were a lot of fun to work with, and it's good to see that you haven't changed.
No, it's true. The hardest part about being here is that most days I am just on my own, and I am a total newsroom rat, and I just love there's nothing like a big, loud, boisterous, lively newsroom. And in Washington, it's 100 reporters on 2 floors, and they're smart as hell, and they know. It's like getting a master's class in whatever, in any subject. My colleagues are so smart. So that's the thing I miss. It's just that back and forth.
Yeah, that's really, I think, for all of us, even on a smaller scale like the Sentinel, we really miss being with each other. We've been out of that newsroom for a year.
Yeah.
How big is your bureau in Brussels?
It's 4 people now. When I got here, it was myself, Steve Erlanger, who's our chief diplomatic correspondent, but who is very rarely in the office because he's traveling the world. Not this year. We have a news assistant from Poland who kind of keeps the office running and helps out with the reporting. And then we have Martina Stevis-Gridneff, who covers the EU institutions.
Is there anything, Matt, that I haven't asked you that you'd want people to know, either about how you got to where you are or what you're doing? It's kind of like, I always liken our jobs to going to school every day and getting paid for it. It's the most.
It's a lot of fun. It's
Yeah.
a lot of fun. It really is. How are you guys doing? I try to keep up with the Maine news every now and again. It seems like COVID. It seems like the state has done a pretty good job from afar, anyways. I look, and originally I think I thought, well, it's probably just because it's a rural state, and but then I look at what's been going on in the Dakotas, and it's obviously there's something else going on. Is it what do you think it is?
We're doing really well here. I would say that the new cases, the new COVID cases each day are declining, and the number of deaths have declined. We have Governor Mills has a really good rollout plan for the vaccine, as Dr. Nirav Shah, who's the head of the CDC here. Very well organized. People in this area are getting vaccines. My husband just got one, his first. Yeah. So, and they're, there's a mask mandate. I think that people are, for the most part, doing pretty well with that and staying away and, trying to be safe.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a scary time. Anything else, Matt, that I haven't?
No, I mean, I think we had some questions in the chat here.
Yes. Yeah, let's take a look.
Yeah.
And I encourage people, if they want to ask questions of Matt, to go to the Q&A function. Lisa DeSisto, our CEO, she says, it's rare for a journalist not to be active on Twitter. Matt doesn't engage on Twitter. Why not? And what are his thoughts on the intersection of journalism and social media?
So I was on Twitter. I think I'm 5-6 years sober off Twitter now. And I was all set to delete my account, but then a colleague told me that because it's a verified account, if I delete it, it'll just get taken over by sex bots. So I did.
Don't want that to happen.
Left it dormant. I didn't quit Twitter out of some high-minded ideal. I quit Twitter because it was ruining my attention span. Like I would read the New Yorker, I'd read a long form story, and I'd have that wonderful moment of surprise and discovery that you get when you read something. And then instead of enjoying it and being pulled into the story, I immediately pull out my phone, be like, "Oh, I tweet this," and it was really messing my attention span up. So I took a couple days off and I deleted the app, and I just found it was really cleansing. And as I took a step back, I began to see that I feel like Twitter is great in a lot of ways, but the discourse there, it's sort of like the worst Washington cocktail party, and not with Nazis. And I didn't want to be involved in that, and more time for me to be knocking on doors, less time tweeting my, what I'm having for dinner.
And it hasn't hurt your journalistic work at all.
It hasn't. I mean, if I were covering a daily beat if I was covering politics, I probably would have to be on Twitter. I probably wouldn't tweet, but I would be on Twitter seeing what the politicians are saying, because that is now a major way of communicating. I can still go on and check it if I need to look for something, but the world doesn't need to know what I think about things.
Yeah. I'm just looking down through the questions here. Jacques Moore asks, what have you learned from your mistakes, and how have they made you a better journalist? You don't make mistakes, do you?
No, everybody makes mistakes. Yeah. Look, I think the single best piece of advice I got was, handle your mistakes the way, don't judge me on my best day. Everybody looks great on their best day, right? Judge me by how I handle my corrections. Judge me how I handle, the angry phone call from somebody who's got a legitimate beef for the story. If I handle that well, then you can say, okay, good. He's a good reporter. Everybody looks good on the day they hit the game-winning home run. But we all have days where we just screw up. And if you can handle that like a pro, then you're a pro. And so I think that is the big lesson for me.
That's a good answer, Matt. Sonia St. Pierre asks, your opinion on fake news.
I'm against it. I mean, I'm against it. I don't know how we have to get past this moment where, facts are relative, right?
Yeah.
How
How did we get here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a question I guess I don't think about all that often, but do you consider yourself a reporter or a journalist? And what is the difference?
I don't think there is a difference. The one distinction I guess I would make is an editor is also a journalist, but not a reporter. So I would say I'm a reporter. I'm also a journalist, but I don't know. Journalist sounds like a little too
Hoity-toity.
Yeah, I'm just a reporter.
Yeah.
When I had to get new business cards when I took this job, and so like I guess when they announced that I was making this move, it was like a European or international investigative correspondent. So they said, do you have to get you new business cards? I said, just put reporter on there. It's just better. Like it's just that's what it is. It's just there's no difference. It's all just reporting.
Boots on the ground.
It's on the ground, man.
Karen Heck, the former mayor of Waterville and a Colby graduate, by the way, she says, hi, Matt. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the fact that there have been a lot of ex-military/police officers who were engaged in the attempted coup and the connection between them and right-wing factions now being investigated in Germany and other countries in the EU. Are you following any of that?
I am following it. My colleague is doing some incredible work. My colleagues in Germany are doing some incredible work on the rise of the far right there and some of the overlap to the movement that's going on in the United States. I did cover a lot of what I would call the militarization of police departments for the Times and the AP. I saw in the chat my old friend Ron Teachman, the former police chief of New Bedford and South Bend, Indiana, is in the chat, and over more than one beer over the years, Ron and I have talked about the question of policing and the issue of does it make sense for police departments to be actively recruiting former military? Like, is it, in some states, veterans get an automatic benefit if they want to go into a police department. They get preferential treatment for hiring. And I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of we want our veterans to get jobs. And Ron and I have had a lot of conversations about if you have been on patrol as a soldier in Iraq, does that make you qualified? Does that actually make you qualified to patrol the streets of Waterville? I know some brilliant police officers who are former military, but I also know some military, former military guys who come to police departments and it's just not the right fit. So I think these are questions that go bigger than questions of left and right, or white nationalists. I think the question of militarization and what we want from our police departments is a conversation that the country, the world is I think having in a really major way right now.
Thank you for that, Matt. Let's see what else we've got here. A lot of people are asking questions. What was the biggest, this is from Ann Miller, what was the biggest professional disappointment during your time in DC?
What was the biggest disappointment in my time in DC?
Biggest professional disappointment during your time in DC, was there one?
No, there wasn't. I had a wonderful time in Washington. I really did. And for all of we all grouse about Washington and it can be a depressing place sometimes. It's also a place that's filled with people who are really smart and who legitimately want to try to do the right thing. And for all of the ills of Washington, it can be easy to forget that. And it's a beautiful city. So any professional disappointment I had, I think, was far outweighed by feeling, I think, privileged to cover the national news on that stage.
Thank you for that. Scott Monroe, who you heard from before, a managing editor at the Morning Sentinel Kennebec Journal, asks, he says that Margaret Sullivan, former New York Times public editor and media columnist for the Washington Post, writes in her book, Ghosting the News, that the newspaper industry now comprises two distinct groups, the haves, such as the Times and the Post, and the have-nots, most local papers falling into that category. That is, large papers are able to attract a big number of digital subscriptions and remain in business, while local papers struggle and some go completely underwater, creating news deserts in some cases. What do you think local papers can be doing in this difficult climate?
Yeah, it's something I think a lot about. That I think I've done a lot of hand wringing on. I think this is a major issue, Amy. I think, when I was in Connecticut, I covered to some degree electric boat. They make submarines for the Navy, and the guys at EB would say, once you stop making submarines, like once that industry goes away, you don't just decide to start making submarines again. Like you either make submarines or you don't make submarines. And I'm afraid that once you stop having community daily journalism in a city, and the city council knows that they don't have to call Amy Calder to say, we're going to go have drinks and it's a quorum and I need to let you know, then pretty soon the business of the public gets done by a bunch of people, politicians, making decisions in secret over drinks, and you can't turn that back on easily. So I'm afraid for that, and I'm a supporter of. I was on the board of IRE, the Investigative Reporters and Editors. And I know we're as an institution, we've been supportive of Report for America, which is like a Teach for America program to try to get journalists to cover the costs of getting journalists into communities. I don't understand why local newspapers in general haven't been able to brand themselves the way, local food suppliers have said, eat local and buy local. I think that, read local, subscribe local, watch local. It's so important. It's in many ways more important to subscribe to your local newspaper than it is to subscribe to the Times, because as Scott said, we're blessed right now. We've got good owners and good editors, and we have a very healthy subscriber base. The news is expensive, and it doesn't stop becoming expensive to cover local news. So I think it's a huge problem.
Yeah, and I think educating young people is so important about how important the news is and why.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah.
I see somebody put the subscribe to the local paper link in there. So we should subscribe to the local paper.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Let's see what else we have from Patrice Franco, who we heard from before, who introduced you. Again, from your European vantage point, what lessons are there for bringing the political right back to center?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, right, the politics has always been fragmented, right? I mean, going back to, you can look at the Clinton era as an example of the left moving to the center, right? You can look at Goldwater on the Republican side, and there's always been tension between the sort of the far left and far right and the more centrist parties. I mean, frankly, one of the things that's been so fascinating for me to see here in Europe is just the way countries that have multi-party systems operate. And in much of Europe, I mean, here in Belgium, you can have nine political parties, and nobody gets a majority of the votes. And because of that, they have to form these coalitions. And in order to do that, you have to learn to compromise. And so part of part of governing in Europe is about building consensus and building compromise. So you don't get everything you want, but you voted for a center left or a center right party. And in order to build a coalition, they have to sort of take a half step to the left or the right to bring in the far left and the far right into the fold. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, the two-party system in the United States, unfortunately, right now, it doesn't really support that kind of compromise, right? And so I think we're going to see with Biden is a question of he ran on a platform of governing from the middle and governing for everyone. People seem to have responded to that, and I think it's going to be a real test to see if there is still a healthy middle in politics in the United States right now.
I just happened to think as you were talking, they say that the Republican Party now is it's not as strong as it was, and it is actually split now between the Trump people and the old, traditional Republican Party. Do you think the Republican Party can survive this latest? And what will it look like? What will it look like?
I'm probably not the right person to ask because I've been away for the last 2.5, 3 years. But again, I mean, I've also read stories that, AOC is going to Senate challenge Chuck Schumer, right? It's the same issue. Are we governing from the center? Are we governing, left of center? What does good government and what does compromise look like? So I don't know. I don't know what the future of the Dems or the Republicans looks like.
It's going to be an interesting few years coming up. Here's one from Carol Good. Does knocking on doors internationally require you to have other language skills besides English? And what are your thoughts on your study of another language at Colby or elsewhere? Good question.
Thoughts on studying language at Colby is I sure wish I had paid more attention in French. Yeah. So I do speak a little French. I speak enough French to be able to read the newspaper and, figure my way out around here. I don't conduct my interviews in French. If I do need to conduct, I will bring a native speaker with me. Knocking on doors is a challenge in Belgium, and as a foreign correspondent, I've had to sort of adapt my strategies a little bit to that very issue. But yeah, I think language. My kids are studying 2 languages in addition to their education in English. So I am a huge. I think anybody who spends any time out of the United States is like, God, we need to be learning more languages.
Yeah. Let's see what else we've got for you. Greg Levinsky, a fellow reporter of mine at the Sentinel. I know you touched on this a bit, but what have you found are best practices with source building with people you have not met / may not ever meet due to COVID? It can be challenging to fully build a relationship when it's 100% virtual.
It's a huge issue.
Yeah.
And I wish I had some magic advice here. For me, covering the coronavirus beat, if you will, I've spent a lot of my time reading these journal articles and the preprints and just calling doctors and sitting in on webinars. And so that has moved, migrated online pretty nicely. I don't know how you cover the local police department remotely. You gotta get out there. And I think that's why in a lot of, certainly where I am now, countries are recognizing journalists as essential workers, because you can't do this. You just can't tell people what's going on in the world sitting behind a desk. So I don't think there is a solution. I think if you still need to knock on doors, wear a mask, wear 2 masks, don't come inside, say, can we talk to you outside? It's tough in Maine, it's cold. But I think that face-to-face is always going to be preferable.
It'll be a relief when we don't have to wear those masks and we don't have to, if that day ever comes, to be able to just go into the police department and not worry about getting sick, So let's see. This is from Diane Crookcow. How do you think newspapers and journalism will develop in this country? Will journalists go more and more toward cable news?
I don't think so. There's some fantastic, I was a contributor for MSNBC for 2 years while I was at the Times. There are amazing journalists working in TV news. So it's not the medium that's the issue. When people talk about cable news, I think they talk about people coming on and giving their opinion. And opinion is cheap. And facts are hard. Facts are expensive. Facts, you have to pay somebody to go out and find the news. I think if your goal is to be on television and to be a star, TV's great. I think if you want to be a journalist, somebody who goes out and digs up the news, I think cable news, there are plenty of avenues for you to do that. But I think that's not what people mean when they say cable news. I mean, when I think about, my friend Evan Perez, at CNN, who covers the FBI for them and does it so well, I don't worry about the quality of journalism and TV news. But I don't think people are going to gravitate towards the shouting as journalists. I think viewers may gravitate towards the shouting, but I think journalists still recognize what good journalism is.
I am scrolling through. Solange Kellerman. Do reporters and journalists go to journalism school these days or learn on the job? If the latter, how is ethics of reporting learned?
So I didn't go to journalism school. I got my journalism school from you. Yes, people still go to journalism school. Whenever there's a job opening, we had a news assistant job open here. I think we got 300 applications. A lot of people go to journalism school, but a lot of people still come up through both the normal ranks and have more unusual careers. And frankly, the question of ethics is a tough one. And I'm not so worried about anybody who came up. If you spend time in a local newspaper or in a local TV station, you learned the ethics. You had to. You learned from your mentors. But yeah, people who just go right to, who come right to, the New York Times out of college in some really entry level position, as they move up, I think one of the things that's really important is just making sure that we take the time to teach people our ethics handbook and also just to model good ethics. And so when we make a mistake, to cop to it and to do it quickly and effusively. And so, yeah, it's a real issue. I don't have a great answer, I guess.
That was a good answer. Oh, let's see what else we have for you. Eric Socher wants to know, can you talk about what it was like to be a journalist pre-2016 and how, if it has changed, or him personally during 4 years when the press was called the enemy of the people by the President of the United States?
Yeah. So I had my phone records secretly subpoenaed by the government for writing about the CIA. About two months of my phone records and my reporting partner's phone records and my editor's phone records and the phone records of everybody calling in and out of my bureau were seized by the government. And that was done under the Obama administration. And I thought, well, the floodgates are open now. Here, this is a Democratic administration that, said it was going to be the most open and transparent in history. And they went on this crusade going after people who talk to reporters that wasn't blessed by the White House. And they put sources in jail, and they used the Espionage Act more times in that administration than all of the presidents combined. So that's what happened pre-2016. Now we get to 2016, and we have a president who wants to use this term that's not just offensive, it's dangerous to be calling a reporter as the enemy of the people. That's how we get to a place where when there's the insurrection at the Capitol, that you see "murder the media," painted on a door. It's a real problem. It's dangerous, and if it's dangerous in the United States, it's doubly dangerous in parts of the world where strongmen and dictators clearly feel like they've been emboldened by the United States government to say, hey, yeah, we do surveillance on journalists, but so does the United States. Yeah, we jail journalists, but you've given us permission to call them enemy of the people. So it's a real problem. The rhetoric's got to change, and I don't care who's in office, what party's in office. It's just that can't happen. That rhetoric can't happen.
Matt Apuzzo, thank you so much. I'm told that we have to wrap it up. Matt, we really appreciate your time and your insights, and we know you're very busy. So thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you to all the people who tuned in. And when you come back to the US, Matt, please come and visit.
I will, and please give everybody my best. I miss Waterville, and I miss the Sentinel.